So I picked up this block of basswood. It's a 12 by 8 block of wood. It's actually 2 blocks glued up together. And the idea behind it is going to be this English Bulldog. So I only have this one reference picture. My friend sent it to me on a vacation that they had. And the family fell in love with this dog that kind of guarded the door as they walked in. So they thought it'd be a great idea to have it replicated so it can go to their own home. And excited to get started with it. So without further ado, let's get carving. The first step is to start rounding the edges of this big block. Then I find the neckline to separate the head and body. So the next part that I'm looking to do, now that this is roughed out a little bit, I have where the ear line is, at the shape of the head curved on both sides. So now I have to think about this ear is going to be pushed back to about here, and underneath the chin and these jowls all have to get pushed back to about here. So that's what I'll be working on right now. I lost the audio on this part, but I'm using a gouge to carve out the line I drew for where the back leg is. Then I use a big fish-tailed chisel to remove the wood, since the leg should be sticking out the farthest on this side. I do the same thing with the front feet. I use a big number 9 chisel to carve around the nose and jowls. Then I push back the head above that line. With the top of the head roughed out, I have to start thinking about removing the wood to make the chin stick out more. As you can see, the back of this Bulldog is still a block. It takes a while, but this fishtail gouge is a perfect tool for rounding out the back. Carving this line in the back will help me visualize where the back of the head and the body meet. Sometimes it helps to use the inside of the chisel to draw back the wood. This is especially helpful when carving features like the leg on this dog. Then I can flip the tool around and use it to shave off some tool marks. Alright, at this stage, I would say it's pretty much roughed out. The basic shapes that I'm looking for are set in. I have his legs, chest, and belly kind of going under. On this side, he's sitting on his hip, so this is getting turned in. I'm still not exactly sure how I want to finish the back. It's going to slope up a little bit, but I can walk away for now. Basically, what I need to do next is this chin should be sticking out the furthest. That means these jowls on either side need to get pushed back. And I think that'll help me see exactly how wide the head should be and how to tuck the ears in. They're kind of fold in a little bit, so that'll give me the space to work with it. All right, let's get to it. I use a small number 11 or U gouge, and I trace where the upper lip and chin should sit. Then I use a chisel to round the mouth and chin and push back the jowls. I repeat the process until I'm happy with the lips, chin, and those jowls. Next, I use the number 9 gouge to find the upper lip and nose. you could see that I'm taking small slices in order to make these subtle changes. Once I find the nose, I switch back to using my mallet to give more shape to the jowls. After drawing on the nose around the shape that I roughed out, I can use a V-tool to cut out a clean line that will refine the nose. The knife further refines the details in the nose and allows me to put a stop cut to the nostril. Now I can use my gouge to blend the upper lip under the nose. With the nose carved, I can concentrate on carving those big eyebrows and eyes. I start by using a small V-tool to cut in just under the lines that I drew. Then I use a chisel to round out the eyebrow. This bulldog has some distinctive wrinkles that make a part down the center of its head. Carving that line in gives me a channel to accentuate the top of the eyebrow. Before I can continue with the eyebrow, I have to plan out where I want the top of the cheek to be. After creating a slight ridge for the cheek, I use a number 7 bent gouge to round the cheek. I use the same tool to give more shape to the ears. Back to the eyebrows, I use the V-tool to create the wrinkle directly behind the eyebrow. It's a constant back and forth between making a cut with the V-tool, then using a chisel to round out the eyebrow and wrinkles. I love this part of the carving process. It's quiet and slow work. For me, it's the best way to relax. Back to the V-tool, I create a cut under the eyebrow. Then I create a spherical shape that will become the eye. With the V-tool, I also start to shape the bag under the eye. So I wanted to take a minute just to explain where I am at this stage of the carving. I have the main features like the eye, the nose, how this chin sticking out. But what I need to do now is these folds over the eyes. They kind of go to the top of the head. They go under the ear and then on the side of the head right here. So it's kind of a weird thing for me to see. So what I'm going to do next is underneath the jowls, there's another fold that sits over the arms and goes all the way to the back of the head. So I think once I cut this in, it'll help me kind of visualize where these folds need to go on the side and then into the back. And once I can get that roughed in, I should almost be done with this. With that bottom fold cut in, I use the U-gouge to create the wrinkles that go down the side of the head. Next, I'll use a number 5 gouge to clean up the cuts and give more shape to the bottom of the jowls. With the wrinkles established under the ear, I can better visualize where the wrinkles will sit on the top of the head. It's time I give some more attention to the back of the carving. The reference pic I had only showed the front of this bulldog, so I was able to use my imagination a bit. I always love seeing pugs and bulldogs sit on their hips, so it was back to the mallet and chisel to remove some big chips to round out this hip. I also have to start thinking about thinning out the belly so there will be a slight space between the front legs and body. Alright, so at this point, all the major parts that I need to carve are carved. I finished up this little leg. That's the last thing I was kind of talking about. I have a roll going over. I may add some more rolls here. I'm still looking at some reference pictures. But basically, the thing I have to do now is, let me get the camera. These little flyaways and tool marks that I have left on, I'm going to go through and just clean those up. And then I'm going to sand everything. And once I sand, then I'll get these eyes carved in and detailed. So for the most part, this guy looks pretty cool, I think. Lots of little fat rolls, like a bulldog should have. And he's got a cool look to him. So I think once it's sanded, it's going to look great. So let's get to it. I brought the Bulldog outside to try out my new finger sander. It was great for some of the flatter areas, but it wasn't small enough to fit under all the rolls without ruining the detail. I spent a long time sanding this dog. After the finger sander, I used my rotary tool and a ton of sandpaper, but I think it was worth the effort. Back inside and out of the dust, I can finally start adding some of these finishing touches. To carve the eyeball, I'll use the same technique I used to carve the spherical shape under the eyebrow. I used a V-tool to create the cut for the eyelid, then I use a sharp knife to shape the eyeball so it will be under the eyelid. Once I'm happy with the shape, I'll create a stop cut under the eyelid and slice up to create a nice shadow. I know I said it before, but it's times like these that make me love carving. All the hours of work that led to these moments that bring the carving and my vision to life. So looking at the reference picture, it's pretty close. The one thing I kind of missed was this head tilt. So the head's sort of askew. I did try for that, and it is slightly askew, but I think to add to that effect, I'm going to have the eyes facing towards the left. So I've drew in some lines, and I'm going to use a very similar process that I used to carve the eyelids. I'll use a V-tool and a knife, and I'll just slightly undercut underneath the eyeball, and that'll give a sense of depth and a little more life to this carving. The last thing I had to carve were these little toes. I use a V-tool to separate the toes, and I also use the same tool to create the wrinkle above his foot. Can't forget his little nails. Again, using the V-tool just to carve out where I want the nails to be. I have to admit, I had some reservations about staining this carving. After I sanded it, I loved the look, and I always get a little scared about adding stain. I feel like this is one of those areas that I need to learn so much about, so if you have any tips, please leave them in the comments. My approach is to add some stain in small areas and then wipe it dry so the area doesn't get too saturated and some of the wood grain still comes through. I purposely leave the stain on longer in the pupils so they will appear darker. I also let the stain sit under the folds to help accentuate some of those shadows. After the stain dries, I spray it with some deft satin finish. This helps to seal it and protect the carving. The last step is to add some Howard's feed and wax. This really helped make the grain pop and bring a slight shine to the finish. Alright, so here he is all finished. I love the way these rolls came out. On this side I have the hip kind of tucked under, like sometimes those pugs and bulldogs sit on their hips. Really love the way these folds in his head came out and these jowls. So this is a real fun project. I definitely like working on this scale. It's a good size and it's fun. You get to get some aggression out with the big chisels and then really fine tune things later on. So hopefully I'll do more projects like this coming up, and let me know what you think about the video and how this guy came out.